Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every other Tuesday, Craig DeLuz of The Rundown. And I want to first of all say thank you to Craig for being flexible. We normally go live at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 5 o'clock in the Central Time Zone. It was very obvious early this morning. Susan and I started this morning in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And it was fairly obvious, fairly early this morning, we weren't going to make it back in time to do a 5 p.m. start. So Craig was gracious enough to say, yeah, I'll go late. And so here we are, 3 hours late. But Craig, thanks for joining us, man.
Always a pleasure, sir. I'll join you anytime I get a chance.
All right. It's been, and I want to, for everybody joining us live, if I have some screw-ups today, please forgive me. It's been 15 days since I touched the home studio setup. There's going to be a few, some rust to knock off. I haven't used this setup in a couple of weeks. So, but we've got... and I do want to remind you, if you comment on either the live Facebook or the live YouTube video, we can get your comments and get them on the air as soon as I get Facebook hooked up here. Find posts and turn it on. There we go. Okay. So we got three stories specifically we wanted to talk about today, Craig, or that I wanted us to talk about. I know you covered at least two of them on the rundown today. And yes. First one I want to talk about is Canada has, Trudeau has gone full gun ban. He wants to totally eliminate the sale of firearms, handguns, everything. He wants to go full gun ban in Canada. I think I've got that right.
Well, he wants to, starting off, he wants to make it so that you can, if you own it, you can still keep it. But he wants to eliminate the sale of all handguns. So there will be no more sale of handguns. He's also looking to ban toys that look like real guns. So any toy gun that looks like a real gun, obviously, is a danger there in Canada as well. It is the first step towards confiscation because as we all know, they keep a registry of firearms, and here's the thing: once they've banned your ability to purchase it, and gun violence doesn't go away, then the next step is going to be, well, then we have to take guns from the people who currently have them. We all know that that's the next step, and unfortunately, with the terrain, here's the thing, folks: if you want to know what's going to happen with a government like that, just take a look at. Take a look at Australia and how they treated their citizens during some of the protests during COVID, how they treated the media, and a lot of that just comes right back to they've been disarmed and they have no way to stand up against a tyrannical government, and the government knows it. Yeah,
we're getting comments coming in, and I want to get for sure get this one up first. Marty Hayes, who. For those of you who don't know, Marty owned the Firearms Academy Seattle and is one of the people. He's the president. He's the president of Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, and I'll be writing a story about that tonight. That'll come out in the Gun Mag tomorrow. But he's got a comment. So was Wayne ousted? Referring to Wayne LaPierre of the NRA. No, unfortunately. Vote came down today. It was 73-1 to re-elect Wayne LaPierre as the executive vice president of the NRA. So, yeah. My mom said if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I'm going to leave it right there.
Well, once again, it goes to show that maybe there's more than one place there. Maybe it's not just the president or the executive vice president that needs to be considered for a replacement.
Yes.
I just don't understand. Once again, I just don't understand how, with everything that is out there right now, and The interesting thing is there are a few people who are refuting a lot of it, that you maintain that. I just don't. And I get to a certain degree, they're like, well, we can't let Letitia James and the anti-gunners win. Yeah, but yet and still, the people who contribute their time, energy, and effort into the NRA, your efforts are being they're not getting the just, what's the word I'm looking for? They're tainted.
Yes,
and they are, and it's sad, but especially when you have someone like Alan West, who is, if there's anything you could say about Alan West, is he's an individual of integrity.
He is.
Leadership and integrity, and it really kind of hurts me to hear that he only got one vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the and Frank Tate was not elected to the board of directors. The 75th board member, my understanding is a reformer, so we'll see. But I'm right there with you, Craig. I think that a lot more reform has to come, starting at the board, and in order for more things to change at the NRA.
Well, and thank God there are other groups like the Citizens' Right to Keep and Bear Arms, like CCCK, like SAF, like FPC, like Gun Owners of America. I mean, there are plenty of groups out there that are fighting the good fight and that are part of it. And this is an opportunity for each and every one of those organizations to step up and take a larger role and get a larger piece of the pie when it comes to the resources necessary to defend our right to keep and bear arms. People wonder, they're always like, well, why do we need a bunch of different groups? Well, this is why. You look at what's going on right now with the NRA, and you realize that this fight isn't going away just because the NRA is under attack and is it's not going. The fight's not going away. We've still got to maintain this fight. So thank you to all of those groups and those of you who support those other groups, because they're doing the yeoman's job right now. Yes,
absolutely. And I've mentioned this before, both on Polite Society and on the Bullet. If the worst case scenario happens and Letitia James is victorious beyond her wildest dreams in New York, if the NRA goes away, it doesn't mean the end of gun rights, because there is SAF, there is FPC, there is GOA, there are a lot of groups that are still out here fighting. Would it hurt? Oh, hell yes, it would hurt, but it wouldn't be the end of gun rights.
No, it wouldn't. And, folks, this is why I'm thankful for all those groups. They don't have groups like this in Canada. They don't have groups that are standing up and fighting for the right to keep and bear arms the way in which these entities are here in the United States. So, I always say a lot of people want to complain about the United States of America, but I'm like, you know what? Show me a better place. Show me a place where you have a greater opportunity to fight non-violently for your rights, right? To defend those fundamental human rights. There's no place else in the world where you have the ability to do that the way you have to do it here in the United States.
Going back to the Canada thing, Canada, interestingly, does not have, everybody, and Susan and I were discussing this in the car on the way home, everybody thinks that Canada is, just America North. Not quite. It is not the United States North. They do not have a Second Amendment in any of their founding documents. They do not have a right to keep and bear arms anywhere. And the way their government is set up, the Trudeau, the Prime Minister, can propose laws. It goes to their legislation, to their legislators, and the makeup of which it's pretty much, this is gonna happen. I know several gun rights activists from Canada. I know several podcasters from Canada that are going to work their tails off. I just don't think they have a great shot of stopping this.
Well, and that's the problem with parliamentary forms of government, which is basically that you don't have an executive branch, so you don't have any sort of a check on the legislative process. So if you have someone who is in power, and whether it's a coalition government or however they piece their power together, if they're the majority, then if they say we're going to do this, then the majority votes to do that. And that's the scary thing. That's once again, I'll just go back to, that's the reason why our form of government works so well, because we have those checks and balances. And if the executive branch doesn't step up and protect our rights, then we've got a judicial branch whose job it is to make sure that our rights are protected according to our Constitution. Now, sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. But when the government is working, they do.
Yes, absolutely. And we're looking forward to that here in a few weeks, I'm hoping. I seen a post on Facebook earlier today that it's within the next 5 weeks that the Bruin decision is supposed to be released. So, you know.
I am 100% confident that the right to bear arms is going to be protected in New York. My only question is, how far do they go? How clear are they in terms of, because, you know, are they going to come and start talking about, like they argue now with Heller, well, there's reasonable regulation. Well, without defining reasonable regulation, we've gotten basically infringements that are called reasonable regulation. But, you know, I'm like this. If you don't know anything about guns, and you don't like guns, and you don't like people who like guns, I'm very skeptical as to whether or not you can actually come up with quote unquote reasonable regulations.
The one reasonable regulation I would be comfortable with is no individual can own a working thermonuclear device. I would be okay with that.
Non-function, non-working, okay.
I titled the next one in the show notes, Biden doesn't know a 9mm handgun from a cruise missile. And Craig, you've got some video. You want to run that?
Yeah, here, let me set this up and I will run it for you right here.
And they showed me a X-ray. He said a 22 caliber bullet will lodge in a lung. And we can probably get it out, maybe able to get it and save the life. A 9mm bullet blows the lung out of the body. So the idea of these high caliber weapons, there is simply no rational basis for it in terms of about self-protection, hunting. I remember, the Constitution, the Second Amendment, was never absolute.
So, there are just so many things wrong with that.
Yeah.
First of all, I would just like to know, where can I get the lung blowing out 9mm ammo? I mean, I've never seen it, but if the president says it exists, it's got to be there. I mean, is it like on the back shelf? Is it on the bottom shelf, or I
gotta believe there were Secret Service agents just off camera going,
and then there's this whole, the Second Amendment is not an absolute right. Now, I could be 100% wrong, but shall not be infringed. I don't understand what doesn't make that, for lack of a better term, absolute.
Yeah, when I was a very young man, I took a semester of paralegal studies. I was toying with becoming a paralegal as a career, and then communications took over in college, and I wanted to become the next Howard Stern. See how well both of those worked out for me. But anyway, in legal terms, may and shall are two. And there's if it's may, then you get New York's may issue. Shall and shall not is absolute. That is the definition of absolute, is shall and shall not. There are to be no exceptions. So in legal terms.
Exactly. Which once again begs the question: how is it there are so many different rights that the anti-gunners and the left claim that they have that are not in the Constitution, but the one of the first two that are specifically labeled, right? Do not. Shall not. This is a given. Is the one we're raising questions about?
I'm wondering if coming up, they're gonna take away arms. What's next? You have to go to the Unified Church, and you'd better show up on Saturday when they have their services. You're going to be assigned a church, and you will go when they have their assigned services.
Oh, I'm sorry. Don't you don't get it? That's critical race theory, right? Social justice theory. All of that combined, because if once again, if you don't go to your training for your critical race theory, queer theory, modern feminism training, all of your social justice theory training, that is the edict, that is the indoctrination right there of the new orthodoxy. And with that comes socialism and greater government control, so that you will bow down at the church of woke governmentism. I know that's not SAF, but I mean it's not their main thing. But trust me, a major part of that is making sure that the right to keep and bear arms goes away.
Yeah, so you can't resist the other infringements.
Exactly. As I said, the Second Amendment is the one that defends all others.
All right, and then the one other story I want to get to, and I'm sure this is going to take up the rest of our time. We had a press release come out from Second Amendment Foundation today, and I want to, excuse me, I want to go ahead and read this. In their zeal to create the impression they are taking action in the wake of two horrible mass shootings, the House Judiciary Committee will hold a special session later this week to talk about the so-called Protecting Our Kids Act. But the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms says this is just another reheated leftovers from a long-used gun control menu that has proven to be a failure. The 41-page bill encompasses a wish list of gun control measures, including raising the minimum age for purchasing any semi-auto rifle or shotgun to 21 years. It prohibits straw purchases, which are already illegal. It mandates serial numbers on all firearms, ostensibly to track so-called ghost guns, but it sounds suspiciously like a backdoor effort at gun registration and a prohibition on being able to make your own firearms. The bill would require so-called safe storage of firearms, which seems unenforceable at best. It bans so-called large-capacity magazines, which are actually standard equipment for modern semi-auto rifles and most semi-auto pistols. There's also a section on bump stocks. And continuing on, we have very serious misgivings about this legislation, said CCR-KBA Chairman Alan Gottlieb, especially about the bumps rush certain members of Congress are using. Congress needs a cooling off period. We've seen in the past how hasty action has resulted in bad legislation, and we shouldn't hurry to pass something so we can see what's in it. I love that, by the way. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the end here because I love this part too. If we can't stop this legislation in the House, we will stop it in the Senate, and if it gets past the Senate, we'll likely challenge it in federal court, Gottlieb concluded.
Right, and a lot of these things that they want to stick in this bill are actually already cases out there moving on their way to the Supreme Court. So it likely will not take as long as it would normally take for something like this to arrive at the Supreme Court, should it finally get to that point. But ultimately, here's the thing, and it's funny because I was on a Beach City Radio podcast today, or video podcast, and which is an African American radio station out of Southern California, and I really believe they thought that they had this person who was about stopping violence, stopping gun violence against our children, and this. That. They really thought they had an anti-gunner versus a pro-gunner, but she came out and was like, "Look, it ain't about the guns." She said flat out, we need to stop giving criminals a slap on the hand. We need to start to enforce the law. She was talking about how they were arresting people in the morning with a gun, and they were out by the afternoon and on the street getting another gun.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we know that's happening, and we're talking about that, right? But now you're hearing it from people in the neighborhood, people who normally support the Democrats. People who normally support the gun confiscation and gun control movement. But they're like, no. This is about crime and consequences. And it was phenomenal. And the problem is that they don't want to admit, Democrats don't want to admit, anti-gunners don't want to admit that their soft on crime, decriminalized crime policies are what's causing or what's fueling this increase in not just petty crime, but violent crime and violent crime involving firearms. It's not the guns. Gun laws have not gotten any looser. They have not gotten more permissive in places like California or Chicago or New York.
Yeah,
and that's what she was. I'm telling you to tell you that there is hope. There's hope because there are people out there who get it. People who normally are not on our side on a lot of these issues, but they get it now. They understand it now.
That's a great thing. I'm glad that is starting to come about, and I only hope that it is becoming more pervasive in society. Truly, crime is and the soft on crime is the big problem, and you're the only way you're going to turn this around is really twofold. I'm going back to the 1990s when Andy Brown went through the incident that caused him to write the book Warnings Unheeded, Twin Tragedies at Fairchild Air Force Base. It keeps coming to my head. Andy Brown was the security officer that actually shot the mass killer at Fairchild Air Force Base. And he wrote the book because the mass killer there was time after time after time, there were warnings this guy was going to go bad. And the Army just kept sweeping things under the rug, and in each of these mass killings we see, the killer gives clue after clue after clue, and these are just, the poor kid's just turning his life around. Give him one more chance. He's gonna get it straight. Just, we're still working on him, and then this, he snaps, and tragedy occurs.
Well, you're right. It's so often a failure of government. In this case, you had locked doors. You had a locked gate, and if the gate hadn't been propped open for the guy to just walk right in, because I guess one of the staff or teachers who were there needed to get something from their car, they created the opportunity for this guy to just walk right in and walk right on campus. You had officers who were there who could have possibly should have been able to get into that classroom a lot earlier, and who knows how many lives they would have saved. We don't know how many of those victims bled out as they waited for,
yes,
as the police waited to enter that classroom. I'm far be it for me to be one to second guess him, because I wasn't there. I wasn't in that situation. But I will tell you that I feel like I need answers, and I feel a lot of people feel like they need answers, because once again, this is the system failing the people. In the case of Buffalo, New York, this was the guy who said he was going to shoot up his high school graduation, right? And how is this guy? You should not be able to make a threat like that and not have to deal with some sort of, there should be some sort of a flag on your record or something, right? Because that's not a person who should just be given the ability to purchase a firearm. Now, you can say you're joking or anything like that. I'm like this. There's a reason why when you're in line at TSA, you don't make jokes about bombs or about terrorists, because you are begging to be investigated. You are begging to be strip searched, right? That's just dumb. And here's the thing. If you are that dumb, then maybe you shouldn't have a gun. I'm just saying. If you're going to make an argument, if you're going to say, well, I was just joking about shooting up my high school graduation, then maybe you're not smart enough to own or possess a firearm.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I remember having that conversation this past weekend as well when we were at the NRA annual meetings, that if you are within a mile of the airport in your car with your friends, you stop joking about terrorism. You stop joking about explosives and all that stuff. You don't even wait till you get to the airport to stop.
Right.
Because everybody knows it's not a joke, and TSA doesn't have a sense of humor. No. When do we get to the point where the schools take security as seriously as that?
Well, this is a district that evidently had campus security. Now, I don't know many schools that have armed security at elementary schools, which is why I believe that in some cases these places become targets. Mostly they're at high schools, because most of the time when there is violence that takes place, it does actually tend to happen at a high school, because the greater chance of a high school student being the one engaging in that activity, I guess. But that generally tends to more be the case. But they had, in the district of I think 4 or 5 schools, they had 4 or 5 campus officers. I just know in this, and I will continue to say this, there's a reason why the organization Faster Saves Lives is growing every day and now traveling all across the country, training school staff, and that's because they realize, and more schools are realizing something, that oftentimes law enforcement are minutes away when minutes away when seconds matter. And we are our own first responders. And I was telling somebody, I said in the interview today, I said, I know you don't like the idea, but what is it about having someone who is trained, someone who is background checked, someone who has a desire and has expressed a desire to be able to protect your children and is right there with your children should something happen? Someone who is willing to stand between, not just willing to stand between a perpetrator and your child, but is capable of actually being able to defend your child. What is it exactly you have against that?
It's amazing. It's and how do I put this? You have to have at least average intelligence to get a teaching degree. You used to have to, at least, depending on what you're going to be teaching. You don't get that teaching certificate if you don't have something going on upstairs. So if you've got something going on upstairs, I can train you to be safe with a firearm and to effectively use a firearm. Faster can train you to do it effectively in a classroom environment. And I wish more states would allow that to happen.
Well, there's also this fallacy that law enforcement get all of this ongoing training when it comes to things like active shooter situations, and the reality is that they don't get nearly enough. And I think if you look at what happened right there in Texas, and you see what happens when you don't get that kind of training on, and getting it at the academy is great, but it's just not enough. And I'm saying that when you have the opportunity to train side by side, they actually had, here in Sacramento, California, we had a school district, Folsom Cordova, that actually had their concealed carry permit holders, people who had concealed carry permits, they were part of their active shooter response plan. They trained side by side with law enforcement. And, in those high stress situations, you don't know how you're going to respond unless you've gone through the training, right? Unless you've gone through that and you are now prepared. And by the way, they didn't just train once, they trained on a regular basis on this is exactly what to do. And they were never really trained to be like, okay, you're going to go and engage. Their training was, okay, you're going to stand between, you're going to get between them and the kids, and your main thing is get the kids out, get the kids safe.
Yes.
But at least if you have to defend them, you're prepared to do so.
Well, everybody knows Amanda, who's going to be on tomorrow. Amanda Suffolk has been through faster training, as has Rob Morris, another person that works with me often. I have not. I have been through active shooter interdiction through the Firearms Academy of Seattle, and I need to go again because it's been a couple of years. But I need to go back again. And I will say this: that one course, active shooter interdiction, taught me more about myself and expanded my skills more than any other course I've ever taken. Mm-hmm. And so if you have an ability to go take either a faster saves lives course, or you have an ability to take an active shooter interdiction course, especially if it's offered through the Firearms Academy of Seattle, I cannot recommend anything any higher than that for increasing your firearms abilities, your ability to handle yourself and your firearm under extreme high stress situations.
Sounds like a plan. Definitely gonna have to do that.
Alrighty, man. Well, we are past the half hour, and I know you've got plans with your family to go to a movie tonight. So,
yes, we're gonna go see Top Gun.
Awesome,
Maverick.
There you go.
America.
That's kind of on my to-do list for the weekend. I've got a whole week of work I've got to get taken care of in the next 4 days. But yeah, I'm really hoping that I can get that done this weekend. And Marty, I'm just going back to look at comments. I don't know who the one was that voted against Wayne, but I just know it was everybody but one voted for him, and there was one that voted against. I do not know which board member voted against. I don't know if that. I'll check with John Richardson and see if I can find out who the one was and if they'll even make that public. So, that's that does it for the comments. So I think Craig, on our way out, if you would plug the rundown, if you would, man.
Rundown, it is on at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Western, Monday through Friday. We talk about 2A News and conservative views. You can find us on Facebook. You can also find us on YouTube at 2A News. That's 2A News. We're also on OpsLens. By the way, you can also watch us on Spotify, and you can listen to the podcast version anywhere you get your podcasts, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google Podcast, and once again, Spotify.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for joining me very late today, Craig, and enjoy the movie tonight, man.
I most definitely will. Thank you for having me, my friend.
And for viewers and listeners, come join us again live 5 p.m. Central Time the rest of the week. We're going to have regular live bullets for the rest of the week, and we'll have a noon Central Time weekend bullet on Saturday. Thanks for watching, everybody.